Well, it's that time of the year. And whether you're an educator, somebody heading back to school, or maybe you're just out of that altogether, it doesn't matter. We're all affected with back to school season. And this is the perfect time to make a Snare Saturday video showing you 5 things you should be doing to make sure that your snare drum is in tip-top shape for the upcoming school year, or those 5 things you should be doing to that snare drum that you found for a really affordable price and you need to bring it back to a playing condition. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with the channel, hi, welcome. My name is Costa and I am a drummer from Philly, PA. And being that it's back to school season, a lot of educators are going to come across a bunch of different drums, including some unnamed drums like the one that I have here. This is a little bit different, however, because it's a segmented drum that I bought when I was in college, and it's been sitting at my parents' house for about a decade at this point. So I'm going to be going over 5 things you should be doing to your snare drum to make sure that it's in the best playing condition that it possibly can be in. Now, before we dive into this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button as well as the bell icon. That way you're notified of any additional content that I upload to the channel. Like I've mentioned before, this is an unknown snare drum to me. I don't know who made it, but it is a segmented drum. So similar to stave construction, instead of the glue seams being vertical, they are horizontal. And if you look carefully, you can see that the blocks of wood are stacked on top of one another and then milled down to make the shell that I have here. This drum is a 6.5 by 14, that's depth by diameter, and the woods that are used in it are maple, wenge, and zebra wood. Now looking at the hardware, it's looking like generic drum hardware, which could have been purchased from WorldMax, maybe even drumfactorydirect.com. Shout out to drumfactorydirect.com. If you are ever in need of components to build a drum or replace on a drum, they're gonna have everything that you need. And that's not a paid endorsement. I'm just a big fan of their website and I have used it to get gear that I need to rehab or build some drums. Anyway, this drum has 10 double-sided brass tube lugs, black nickel die-cast hoops on the top and the bottom, a very generic throw-off and butt plate. And when I was using this as a primary snare drum, I put a Remo-coated ambassador on the top. You can even see from the logo that it's an older drum head. But since I was a college student with very limited money, the bottom head is the one that came with the drum, which is a Ludwig Weathermaster snare side head and a set of Ludwig snare wires as well. Are you somebody who's familiar with the Percussive Arts Society? Or are you following them on various social media platforms? If you are, then you saw the announcement at the end of July that Mark DiCiani and I will be presenting in person at PASIC 2025. Not only is this the 50th anniversary of PASIC, Mark and I are going to be taking what we've been doing together as educators to create a session that's going to help you practice effectively. So this is going to be more than just for the drum set players. It is for any type of drummer or percussionist. Matter of fact, it'll work with any musician. So head on over to PASIC.org and register to attend PASIC 50 in November in Indianapolis, Indiana. Oh, and if you see us walking around, come on up and say hi. We'd love to meet you. So let's say you're a music educator or you're somebody who came across a snare drum that was in a school. The first thing that you want to do is make sure you take a look at the drum heads. As you can see from this drum, this top head has seen better days. Doesn't matter how well you maintain the drum, when a drum head starts looking like this and looks like it's really weathered, or you start to see that the coating is coming off, it's time to replace the head. Also, resonant side, the side that you're not hitting. Even though you're not striking it with a stick, you still need to look at those heads and replace them as well. Because like a rubber band, the more that you stretch it out, the looser it becomes over time. And the best combination of top and bottom head for a snare drum in regards to versatility, no matter what the style of music is or ensemble, a single ply coated head for the top along with a snare side head on the bottom is always the safest bet. I myself, if I'm going in that combination, will go with a Remo coated ambassador along with a Remo ambassador snare side head. Now, as you're replacing those snare drum heads, you're going to need something like a drum key. My go-to is the Remo Quick Key. Like I've mentioned in other videos, there is a magnet on the inside, so as you are loosening up the tension rods, they stay on the drum key itself, so you don't have to worry about dropping them or losing them if you are in a classroom. But any run-of-the-mill drum key would work just fine as well. Now the beauty of making a video like this is that I can loosen that top head and not have to bore you all as I do it. But here we have the top head has no tension on it. That way I can replace it. The first thing you might notice is that in the center of the head, it caves in a little bit. That is because the drum head is stretched out way beyond where it's supposed to be. But the other thing you have to notice, especially with a top head, you could get stick shavings, dirt, debris, all that kind of stuff in between the collar of the drum head and the hoop itself. So when you take all of that apart, I'm going to put the drum down. But when you take all that apart, you could see there's going to be a lot of stuff that falls out from this. You can even see on the hoop itself that it's pretty gross, right? So when you are replacing that drum head, take that top hoop and head off of the drum first, separate the two from one another, and then wipe down the inside of the hoop either with a paper towel or a microfiber just to get all of that stuff off. So next step, take your new drum head, like this brand new Remo coated Ambassador that I have here, place it on the drum, and I myself like to have my throw off on the left side. And if your drum has a badge, you can get the logo on the drum head to align with that just for aesthetic purposes. Since this one doesn't have a badge, I'm gonna put it in line with that lug right there. That way it puts the throw off at the 9 o'clock position if the drum was a clock. Now, as you're putting that top hoop on, you wanna put every tension rod into either the receiver tube, which is sticking out of the lug, or the top of the tube lug, and finger tighten them down. If you are noticing that you're having a difficult time doing that, you're getting a little bit of resistance, that's where you're going to want to either spray within the lug or wipe down the threading of the tension rod with some form of lubrication to make sure that nothing gets bounded, locked up, and then can break. So as I'm doing this, I actually already sprayed every one of these, so that way it makes it a whole lot easier to thread into place. Something like this dry lubricant, there is that tube that you connect to the nozzle to make it very easy to just spray a little bit into the top of the tube lug itself. From there, you can go about tuning like you usually do. And if you are interested in figuring out how to tune a snare drum, I have a video on that. I'll put it in the description below. I'll also have it pop up there to make it a bit easier for you if you need help tuning your snare drum. Speaking of, it's time to go on to the bottom head. But the first thing you have to do is remove those snare wires. And that's the second thing you have to look out for, is the condition of the snare wires. So what I'm doing here is I disengaged the snare throw off, and now I'm using that fine tune knob and I'm loosening it, and I'll explain why a little bit later. Now with this drum in particular, all I need is a drum key to remove those really small tension rods. Some throw offs and butt plates require screws, so you may need to get a screwdriver, either a Phillips or flathead. It depends on the throw off and the era of it. But simply go ahead and loosen either the screws or those tension rods, and that will remove the strap, which allows you to loosen and take the snare wires off the drum. Now, once you get those snare wires off, you want to inspect them by just holding them up like I am here. If you start to notice that some of those snare wires are warped or stretched out, or if you see that they are breaking off in some areas, it's time to replace them. These aren't in that bad a shape, but I am gonna replace them anyway for the sake of this video. You don't see any of them super warped or bent. And thanks to making a video, like I said earlier, don't have to sit here while I loosen all of these tension rods. But if you take a look, you can also see this head is also past its prime. You can see it's a little wrinkly over here. And if you look carefully, you can see some indents throughout the drum head as well, which again means it's way past its prime. So you take that off just like everything else, and you can see, again, there's still a lot of nasty dirt, dust, stick shavings, whatever you want to say, even hanging down from it there. So you want to take all of that apart and clean it just like you did with the top head and hoop. This is also another time to inspect the bottom edge. If it's a snare drum, you will see that there is a snare bed. This one is pretty prominent, and it's a pretty wide snare bed as well. As a matter of fact, it looks like it starts to dip around here, which is to the right, my right, your left of the lug there. But then on this side, it's dipping down right there, so it's not quite centered, but that's okay. It's a custom build, right? And this snare bed is probably wide enough you could put a wider snare wire strand set, like maybe the Canopus Backbeat 30 or 42 strand snare wires. You can also see on this side too. So there's the top of it there. So it's right on top of the lug, but then over here, it looks like it's over here to the side of it. So it's a little off center. So what I'm seeing from there is it looks like these snare beds were cut before the lugs were drilled and installed to the shell. But no big deal. I'm not feeling any dips or huge chunks out of this bearing edge. So it should be okay. I'm also gonna flip it over because all of that nasty dust that was inside, I wanna get out of the drum. I don't want it stuck in there. Now, while the drum's in this condition, you wanna take a look at the snare throw off itself. So you wanna make sure that everything works and there isn't anything sticking or binding as you're trying to engage or disengage the snare throw off. In school settings, a lot of folks don't really know how this works. So what ends up happening is that this fine-tuned knob gets tightened all the way because somebody hits the drum, they don't hear any snares, they think this fixes the problem, and then somebody who knows, oh, you have to engage with the snare lever, they go to do that, but there's so much tension that either this bends or the components that allow this to engage or disengage breaks, and then you have a throw off that doesn't work. So if that's the case, this would be the perfect time to take the snare throw off of the drum. And with most snare throw offs, like you can see right here, they are attached with mounting screws. These are Phillips head screws, so you could take that off and take the throw off. This is another perfect time that you can use a dry lubricant or WD-40, spray down all the components of the snare throw off, and then engage and disengage that lever a couple times just to get the dry lubricant or the WD-40 through all the components. You'll then notice it's a whole lot easier to engage and disengage those snare wires. Now, if for some reason that snare throw off is broken or not working, you can take it off and then measure the spacing between the top and the bottom hole. And the way you want to measure it is you want to go to the center of the hole for both the top and the bottom and measure the distance between them. You then can go to websites like drumfactorydirect.com, who has countless drum throw-off options for you to find one that fits that hole spacing, and you don't have to worry about re-drilling extra holes or getting a snare throw-off where the spacing is a little bit off. Once again, just make sure that there is no dirt, debris, build up on the inside of the hoop, so clean all of that off. You can also wipe down outside of the hoop as well. And then when you reapply this to the drum, you will notice that you have these eye openings on either side of that bottom hoop. Make sure they are aligned with the throw off and the butt plate of the drum, because that's where the straps or the cord for the snare wires goes through to attach to both the throw off and the butt plate. So now all the tension rods have been finger tightened except for one, because we want to go over one thing real quick, is make sure that your drum has all of its tension rods. Seems pretty obvious, right? But these tension rods are applying tension to the head, and when one goes missing, it can throw that balance off a little bit. And if you are in a school setting where people are cranking down on their drum heads or the tension rod points, when one is missing, that can either put too much pressure on the drum head, which will cause it to break prematurely. It can also warp the hoop if it's not a heavy or thick die cast hoop. Most of them are triple flanged. Also, that additional tension can warp the bearing edge of the drum as well. So if for some reason you have a drum where the tension rods are missing, if you have one and you take it out, you are going to measure from the bottom of the head all the way down to the bottom of the threading, and that will let you know how long that tension rod is. If you're somebody like myself who reads freedom measurements or inches, most of these are identified as millimeter. So you're just gonna have to go on Google and do inches to millimeter conversion, and you can put that in. So that way you know you can get a tension rod that is the proper length. If the tension rod is too long, what will happen is it will bottom out within the lug itself. So you'll see that there's a possibility that the bottom of the head won't make contact with the hoop. And then of course, if the tension rod is too short, it's not really going to hit that receiver tube or that insert on the lug to make sure it can catch tension. So this is why you want to do those measurements to make sure that you get a tension rod that is the proper length. Also, one quick thing when it comes to tension rods, most of them are universal and will fit on a lot of brands. There are certain brands out there, however, that use a different thread count or thread pitch. So make sure before you get tension rods that you look at the brand of the drum, if there is one on there, and just Google search to see what kind of tension rod you need to get, because the last thing you want to do is get the right length, but then you notice that it's not actually going into the lug because it needs a different thread count. So now that that's done, you can look at that bottom head and you'll see that where the snare beds are, where it's cut a little bit deeper, there's a wrinkle there. Because again, even though this is equal tension, there's a dip in the bearing edge. So what I'll usually do is I'll take my drum key and I'll tighten those spots just a little bit to try and get it to even out. And then what I do is I just go around and I tune everything up. And again, like I said earlier, if you are looking for a more in-depth way to tune your snare drum, you can check out that video that I talked about earlier that I posted to the channel, which is a more in-depth view of how I set up and tune a snare drum. Snare wires. So you could take those snare wires and put them on the drum. Again, making sure that those end plates are in line with the eye cutouts of the drum, which is where the throw off and butt plate are. Most brand new snare wires are going to come with new string or a cord, either or. There are companies out there like Canopus that make a snare wire belt. It's a really thick cord, so you don't have to worry about it ripping or coming loose, but whatever you have will work just fine. So if you are using string like I am in this video, you're simply just feeding them through the two eyelids that are on either end plate of your snare wires and then putting them through the eye openings of the hoop itself. And then you want to just make sure that those snare wires are in line and not crooked. So once you have that in line, I always start with the butt plate. You put the string between the plate and the back side of that butt plate. And I know some of you are probably like, yo, we can't see what you're doing. But now that I've done it, I can flip the drum around so you can see what I'm talking about there. So now that that's done, you go to the snare throw off side, make sure that that snare lever is engaged. You place the string through the plate and the back side of that throw off, pull down on that string and then tighten down on those two tension rod points. And this is why you wanted to make sure that you had that fine-tuned knob loose, because when you tap on the drum, you'll hear that those wires are really loose. So you can now tighten them with that fine-tune knob and get those wires to be a little bit more responsive without too tight that they choke out. So that next step is to tune that top head to get the drum to the pitch that you want, and that is user preference. So there you have those 5 things that you want to look out for. One added bonus, you want to make sure that you are treating your drums just like anything else and making sure that they are in tip-top shape, which also means cleaning them. You want to make sure that they are clean so there isn't any debris or grime getting caked up on the drum, which can cause components to fail over time. So I hope that this was a helpful video for all of you with just 5 things you should be looking out for to make sure your drum is ready for the upcoming school year or playing season. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and I will try my best to answer them. Also, if you are looking for certain recommendations on drum heads, snare wires, additional components, or anything else, I have a few affiliate links in the description below, as well as a link to drumfactorydirect.com, which is a great resource if you need to get any missing components for your snare drum. And now that this drum is in playing condition, I'm sure all of you are curious, well, how does it sound? And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about or seeing next week, which will be another Snare Saturday video where I will play this drum through a few different tunings so you can hear what a segmented snare drum sounds like. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see what this entire Snare Saturday series is all about, I've put a link to the playlist in the description below, and I'll also have it come up right here to make it a bit easier for you. Finally, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure that you give it a thumbs up. That not only makes it easier for others to find it, it is a free and easy way to support the channel. And that is it. Thank you so much for checking out this video, and hopefully it has helped you get that snare drum back to a playing condition for your upcoming school year or upcoming playing season. And until next time, see you later.